Good morning, good day, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to Preparing for Paper 2. This is, of course, Part 2. Just a recap. Last time we firstly spoke about the purpose of the business report, and we said that it is to serve the purpose of assisting with decision making. Then we asked ourselves, who is the audience? Who is the business report compiled for? And we said that it is a decision maker or decision makers. And we also took note of the fact that decision makers may or may not be management, depending on the nature of the business. And then finally, we had a look at the format of the business report. Let's quickly go over the format one more time. We said that firstly, at the beginning of your business report, you write down who the report is addressed to. Remember, they may or may not have a title. You need to include the title if you've been given one. Then secondly, who is the sender? Who is the business report from? Once again, if appropriate, include your job title. Then thirdly was the topic. And I said that you need to condense what you're going to be presenting into one sentence or one phrase. And then there's the date. Remember, we don't speak of the 5th of August or the 9th of September. It's 9 September 2020. And then we were on the content section of things. And of course, at the end, you sign off and you put your stamp of approval to say that I back this letter so much, I put my name behind it. Anyways, let's look at the content. I then said to you guys that the content is best explained by use of an example. And I gave you guys the following example about Lyft, who is a ride-hailing company like Uber and Taxify, and they operate in the USA and Canada, and they are looking to enter the South African market. And they're looking for a macro analysis and a market analysis from you. From this question, we were able to distill that the question requires us to do two things. Number one, the pestle. We've already had a discussion of the kinds of points you would need to address in your essay when doing a pestle analysis. Later on in the lesson, I will give you a table to use when planning an essay that involves a macroeconomic analysis by means of a pestle analysis. The question also secondly required us to do a market environment analysis. We have not yet spoken about how we begin thinking about what to include when we do a market analysis with the aid of a Porter's six-force model. And that's what we're going to be doing in today's lesson. Now remember, in the content section, the first thing we do when we introduce a new topic is an introduction. We remember from the previous lesson that the requirements of an introduction are as follows. The introduction should serve to outline the key points or the key content areas you are going to address. And I said to you guys, do not explicitly state this business report will address X, Y, and Z, or this business report will cover, and so forth, or in the following business report we will discuss. Do not do that. We need to do it in a more subtle way. And lastly, do not simply reword the question. Do not apply the rules you've been taught in English literature essays. In this slide, you guys can see how I've chosen to outline the key points or key content areas that I'm going to address. The first key content area is, what is a market? I cannot do a market analysis when I haven't defined a market. And you can see I've written down there, the market is any place, physical or electronic, where goods and services are bought and sold and prices are negotiated. Okay, now that you know what a market is, you want to know just exactly how I'm going to analyze this market. So then next, I tell you that I'm going to use the Porter's five-force model. Once again, without saying this essay or this section is going to use the Porter's five-force model to blah, 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 blah. How I've put it is, Porter's six-force model is a useful tool to identify specific opportunities and threats in the market environment. And you guys can see how we use this section to weave a story, to integrate the topics so that our report has a logical flow. We don't just go from the pestle analysis and then write the next heading, Porter's 6-force model. We introduced it and linked it to the previous section of our report and linked it to the question. That transition is very important. You must keep a logical thread. So, we have used our introduction to introduce and outline the key content areas. We can now begin our Porter's with a subheading. And in this case, Porter's 6-force model would make a good subheading. Remember, always use headings and subheadings. Once again, in the interest of maintaining a logical flow to our essay, we won't jump straight into the first factor. I will introduce the factors with a sentence like this. And let's have our subheading 1, once again, Porter's 6-force model. So under this subheading, I could briefly write something like this. Michael Porter's model is a popular and an easy tool to understand, which is used to analyze the market environment. Porter's 6 forces model investigates the following in the market environment. And then I begin with my subheadings. I'm not actually sure if subheadings is a real word, but we'll use it for our purposes now. So I'll use the subheadings to go through each of the factors in Porter's in my analysis of the market environment. We are just briefly going to look at the kinds of things we look at when doing a Porter's analysis. We'll get into more specific detail later when we sit down and write a paper 2 essay together. The first force we look at in Porter's is the level of existing rivalry. How many current competitors you have, how aggressive do they compete with each other, and how many are they? It is important for any business to know that what competitors are doing. If you can find a sector where a competitor is not performing well, it may present an opportunity for the business to make more profit. By identifying the areas where competitors are achieving success, it may be an indicator of a threat to the business, requiring the implementation of a tactic or a strategy to avoid losses. For example, if a competitor has got a superior marketing strategy, it poses a threat to one's business because customers may be lost to the competitor. When the business is compared to its competitors, the following factors require reviewing. The size and the financial resources of the competitor. What market share does the competitor have? The quality of products and services. Consumer brand loyalty. Pricing of products or services. Convenience of location and distribution channels. And trading hours. Now, your knowledge of these facts will depend largely on two things. Firstly, in the question, we often give you some figures, an article, a graph, and so forth, just to give you some material to answer these questions. However, a large part of this will also depend just on your general knowledge. So it's important that you guys keep engaging with business and economic news and you are aware of certain trends in the business world. The business needs to develop strategies to improve and outperform competitors in the above discussed factors. As competitors, we have the power to lure away customers and thus bring in profits. Now, some examples of such strategies would include customer loyalty programs, which may be introduced to make the business more attractive than its competitors. A business reduces the price of certain products and services to make sure that a business is a more attractive option than the competitors. The second force we look at in Porter's, so this is the next subheading, is the threat of new entrants. So it's not only current competitors who can steal customers away. There may be a challenge from a new business that sees an opportunity to make money by entering your market. An existing business will see any potential new business as a threat to its market share and profits. The business therefore tries to build barriers which are strategies to prevent new businesses from entering the market successfully and taking away part of their market share. Now, examples of barriers to keep entries out the market would include the bigger retailers in shopping malls, such as Pick n Pay, Edgar's, negotiate with the center management to prevent too many competitors from acquiring space in the same center. So this has got to do with negotiation of contracts. A business may also register a patent to deter potential businesses from selling a similar product. Large sums of money may be spent on advertising and having promotions where products or services are sold at a lower price, making it difficult for a new business to enter the market profitably. Even the government sometimes puts in legislation to make it difficult for new businesses to comply with new businesses to compete for supply electricity to customers. I'm sure this is something your teachers discussed with you, how Eskom currently has a monopoly on the electricity grid. A tax on imported goods is a way the government deters people from buying certain products abroad. It's to protect our local markets from cheap mass-produced goods from overseas. Some countries overseas will knowingly produce more than they need in order to boost their economies and to create jobs, and they'll dump whatever's left over on South Africa at prices that are often below what it cost them to make those goods, which makes it impossible for our local businesses to compete. The next force is the availability of substitute products. Now, a substitute product does not refer to a different brand. The issue of different brands falls under the heading of existing rivalry or competitors in the market. A substitute product is a different product that still satisfies the same need. So, for example, a substitute to pizza would be burgers. It's not a competitor, but people can eat a burger instead of a pizza and they'll satisfy the same hunger. Pasta versus a takeaway sandwich from Checkers. Once again, they are both substitutes, not the same product, but satisfy a similar need. The increasing availability of substitute products generates more indirect customers, which a business must consider in order to outperform the businesses, or rather to outperform their competition. The next factor we look at, or the next force rather, that we look at is the power of suppliers. Any business that does not have reliable suppliers is certainly going to encounter problems more often than not. In order to be successful, the business depends on the supplier to provide a good quality product when needed, which means on time, and to deliver the correct quantity to the place needed at a reasonable price. So you can imagine if you have a fast food retailer that sells products at an athletics meeting or a soccer match in the middle of summer, and the supplier can't get your water and drinks to you. So there are lots of costs that are associated with unavailability of cost because your supplier is unreliable. If there's no material, for example, and you are a manufacturer, then you cannot produce. If you can't produce, you can't sell. With no sales, you make no profit. If there's no material, the machines and labor cannot be utilized to their full capacity because the production process will be coming to a halt. Customer goodwill may obviously also be lost to competitors where you are out of stock on something and then people get annoyed because every day, every month, you run out of apples or whatever it is that you're selling. The next force we look at is the power of the buyers. The buyer may be a wholesaler ordering from a manufacturer, or a retailer buying products for his shop, or even a customer who is spending his hard-earned money at your business. If the buyers are not respected and offered good value for money, they may decide to support different businesses. So some of the factors you need to look at when it comes to the power of the buyers is the consumer brand loyal, or is the consumer prepared to swap brands if she can get a better deal? So for example, 2 pizzas for the price of 1. Will they then leave your pizzas and go buy from that 2 pizzas from the price of 1 place? Or are they still so brand loyal that being offered 2 pizzas for the price of 1 does not move them away from you? So that determines how you treat your customers and how much power they have over the business. Price sensitivity. In some instances, buyers may be happy to pay more for a product or service if it's delivered and as a guarantee or is conveniently available. So some goods are more price sensitive than others, depending on the number of substitutes and competitors. However, some goods you can increase the price by a substantial amount and people won't shift from one product to another. With bread is quite price sensitive. If Albany goes up by 2 rand, we may go and buy Sasco. Then there's also something called snob value, or the image associated with the product or service that can also influence whether consumers make the purchase or not. The example is gourmet burgers versus cheap burgers. It won't matter what the cheap burger joints are doing, because you know that your gourmet customers want their gourmet burgers because of the image associated with eating gourmet burgers. The next and final force that we look at is the power of complementary products. A complementary product is a product where the use of one product is interrelated with the use of another product. So these products are often consumed or paired together. We can think about things like coffee and sugar, fish and chips, burgers and milkshakes. I don't know how many of us eat burgers and milkshakes. I do. I love it. Ribs and milkshakes especially. And fast foods and Mr. Delivery. So the cheaper Mr. Delivery is and the more efficient Mr. Delivery is, there'll be more of us buying fast food instead of cooking at night. However, if Mr. Delivery starts to increase the delivery charges, then what's going to happen to fast food outlets? They're going to have fewer and fewer sales. So you can see how the fast food's success depends largely on Mr. Delivery's efficiency. Once again, we then use the conclusion to remind your reader of the key points and how you arrived at your conclusion. Your conclusion must answer a question or provide a solution to a problem. In our example, your conclusion must include a recommendation of either, yes, it's a good idea to enter the South African ride-hailing market, and then remind the reader of the key points that swayed the decision in that direction. The conclusion could also be, no, it is not a good idea, and you'll remind the reader of the key points that you raised in the body of your report that swayed the decision in that direction. There should be no surprises in the conclusion. As you were doing your analysis in the body, it should already become clear somewhat that it appears as though the facts and the circumstances you are raising are pointing towards a particular direction or conclusion. The conclusion may also be yes, but, and you can add certain caveats there. In other words, yes, but only if a certain condition is met. For example, yes, invest, but only if the government drafts the final policy on land. Again, you cannot surprise us in your conclusion. You must have raised the issue of land policy under the political factors part of your pestle analysis. It can't be the first time you bring up land in your conclusion, because you are highlighting key points you've already used in your argument. There's one more thing that comes after the conclusion. You must remember to sign off. This means that you must put your signature down and write your full names below your signature. In the next lesson, we will go through a sample question and answer it together, section by section. We'll also look at how your essays are marked. Thank you very much. Oh, and just one final reminder. I spoke to you guys in the previous lesson about sub-conclusions. And I said that you must include a final conclusion that makes an overall finding or an overall recommendation based on the sub-conclusions you've been drawing under each of the headings. When you complete a big heading, big section, there must be a sub-conclusion. And then you round up all those sub-conclusions into your final conclusion. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.